I inherited my grandmother's abandoned roadside diner in the middle of Arizona. My brother got her penthouse in Manhattan worth $6.5 million. Standing in that lawyer's office, watching him smirk at me across the mahogany table, I felt every ounce of grandmother's disappointment settle onto my shoulders like a heavy coat. Attorney Morrison had just finished reading the will, and the silence in the room was deafening. "The Desert Rose Diner and the 3 acres it sits on," my brother Derek repeated, barely containing his laughter. "That Roach Motel off Route 66 that hasn't served a customer since 2008? Dad, she literally got the trash." My father nodded, his face carefully neutral. My mother patted Derek's hand sympathetically. My younger sister Madison at least had the decency to look uncomfortable, though she'd received $400,000 cash and our grandmother's Mercedes, so her discomfort was probably just guilt. "Why would Grandma Rose do this?" I heard myself ask, my voice smaller than I intended. Derek leaned back in his chair, his designer suit probably worth more than my monthly salary as an elementary school teacher. "Come on, Emma, you know why. She always said actions have consequences. You chose teaching kids in the Bronx over a real career. This is your consequence." "Derek," Madison said quietly, but he waved her off. "I'm just being honest. Look, Emma, I'll help you out. I've got a buddy in commercial real estate. He'll give you $150,000 for the property. It's more than that dump is worth, but I'll make sure he pays it. Consider it my good deed for the year." I stared at the papers in front of me. 3 acres on Route 66 inches, the middle of nowhere, Arizona. A diner that had been closed for 18 years. The property taxes alone would eat up my savings in 2 years. "I need to think about it," I said. Derek laughed. "Think about what? Emma, be realistic. You live in a studio apartment in Queens. You can't afford to keep a property in Arizona. Take the money. For once in your life, make a smart financial decision." That night, I sat in my 400-square-foot studio, looking at the photos of the Desert Rose Diner on my laptop. The images from Google Street View showed a sun-bleached building with broken windows, peeling paint, and a faded neon sign that probably hadn't lit up since I was in elementary school. Tumbleweeds literally gathered against the front door. My grandmother Rose had bought the diner in 1962, right after she arrived from Mexico with my grandfather. They'd run it for 40 years, serving truckers and tourists traveling the historic route. But after my grandfather died in 2006, she'd closed it down and moved to New York to be closer to family. Or so we thought. According to the attorney, she'd spent every single weekend for the past 18 years driving or flying back to Arizona. "What were you doing there, Grandma?" I whispered to the empty room. My phone buzzed. "Derek, my buddy can meet you Tuesday to finalize the sale. Don't overthink this, Em." I had $3,400 in my savings account. Rent was due in 2 weeks. I'd used my credit card to buy my niece a birthday present last month and still hadn't paid it off. The smart thing to do was sell. But something in my grandmother's eyes and the photo on my nightstand stopped me. It was from my college graduation. She'd pulled me aside that day and said, "Mija, you have a good heart. Never let anyone tell you that's worth less than money." Derek had called her senile for the last 5 years of her life. I booked a flight to Arizona for that weekend. The property was worse in person. The November sun beat down mercilessly as I stood in the dirt parking lot, key in hand, staring at what was supposed to be my inheritance. The Desert Rose Diner looked like something from a post-apocalyptic movie. The windows were boarded up. The turquoise paint had faded to a sickly gray-green. The neon sign's rose was missing half its petals. I didn't even have money for a hotel room. The nearest town, Flagstaff, was 40 minutes away, and the cheapest motel I'd found was $89 a night. I'd brought a sleeping bag, just in case. Just in case was apparently now. The front door stuck, swollen from years of heat and neglect. When it finally gave way, the smell of dust and decay nearly knocked me backward. I used my phone's flashlight to navigate the interior. Booths lined the walls, their vinyl cracked and splitting. The counter still had salt and pepper shakers on it, like someone had just locked up for the night and never came back. Behind the counter, the kitchen was a disaster. Rusted equipment, a massive griddle coated in grime, and what looked like an entire ecosystem of spiderwebs. "This is insane," I said aloud. My voice echoed in the empty space. "Grandma, what were you thinking?" I found a broom in a corner and spent the next 2 hours making one booth barely habitable enough to sleep in. The water had been turned off, and the electricity didn't work. As the sun set and the desert cold crept in, I wrapped myself in my sleeping bag and tried not to cry. Derek was right. I should sell. This place was worthless, and I was worthless for even considering keeping it. My phone buzzed. Madison. Where are you? Derek said you didn't call his friend. I didn't respond. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through the gaps in the boarded windows. My back ached from sleeping on the booth's vinyl seat. I was hungry, cold, and beginning to regret every decision that had led me here. But I'd made the trip, so I might as well look around. The diner itself was one large room with the kitchen in back. I'd already seen that. But there was a door marked private behind the counter that I hadn't opened. The key from the lawyer's office fit the lock. The door opened onto a narrow hallway. At the end was another door, this one metal and newer than anything else in the building. My grandmother had installed it recently. Why would you put a new security door in an abandoned building? This lock required a different key. I went through the ring the lawyer had given me, trying each one. The seventh key clicked. The metal door opened onto stairs going down. My heart started pounding. The air that came up from below was cool and dry, completely different from the musty diner above. I used my phone's flashlight and started descending. 20 steps down, the stairs ended in another door. This one was already ajar. I pushed it open and froze. I was standing at the entrance to an enormous underground room, maybe 50 feet by 50 feet, but it wasn't the size that made me stop breathing. It was what was inside. The walls were lined with shelves, and every shelf was filled with pottery. Not just any pottery. Even my untrained eye could see these were old, really old. There were dozens of complete vessels, bowls, jars, decorative pieces in shades of black, white, red, and tan, with intricate geometric designs. In the center of the room sat a work table covered in papers, photographs, and what looked like archaeological documentation. A laptop, closed, sat in the corner, and hanging on the far wall was a framed degree. Rosa Maria Delgado, Ph.D. in Anthropology, University of New Mexico, 1985. My grandmother had a Ph.D. Since when? I moved closer to the table, my hands shaking. The documents were carefully organized in folders. I opened the first one. Ancestral Puebloan Collection, 1100 to 1300 CE. Authenticated by Dr. James Wilson, University of Arizona, 2012. I opened another folder. Hohokam Pottery, 900 to 1000, 150 CE. Appraised value, $2.3 million. Sotheby's Correspondence, 2019. Another folder. Mimbres Culture, 1000 to 1130 CE. Museum Acquisition Interest. Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian, 2021. Estimated collection value, $8.5 million. My legs gave out. I sat down hard on the concrete floor, staring at the shelves around me. There had to be 200 pieces here, maybe 300, each one documented, authenticated, appraised. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and started doing math. The folders I'd opened so far totaled over $15 million, and I'd only looked at 3 out of maybe 20 folders on the table. This couldn't be real. I found a leather journal on the table, my grandmother's handwriting on the first page. To my Emma, if you're reading this, you didn't sell. Good girl. Your brother would have had this property sold within a week, without ever walking through the door. Madison would have been too afraid to explore a creepy old building alone. But you always had the curiosity I had, the need to understand before acting. When I came to America in 1962, I had an 8th grade education and $23 in my pocket. Your grandfather and I bought this diner and worked every single day for 40 years. We saved everything. When he died, I finally had time to do what I'd always dreamed of. I went back to school. I was 68 years old when I got my PhD. Your father laughed at me. Derek called me senile. But you, Mija, you sent me flowers and a card that said, "It's never too late to become who you might have been." I still have it. I spent the last 18 years using the money from the diner and your grandfather's life insurance to build this collection. I attended estate sales, private auctions, and met with collectors across the Southwest. I learned to authenticate pottery, to understand the cultures that created it, to see the value in pieces other people overlooked. This collection is now worth approximately $47 million, conservative estimate. The penthouse I left your brother is worth $6.5 million, and it's already declining in value. The market in that building is oversaturated. I'd be surprised if it's worth $5 million in 5 years. You got the real treasure, Emma. But it's not treasure that announces itself. It requires wisdom, patience, and the ability to see beyond the surface. I've watched you choose a career helping children over making money. I've watched you volunteer at the community center on weekends instead of networking at fancy parties like Derek. I've watched you live in that tiny apartment so you can afford to buy school supplies for kids whose parents can't. You understand what matters. Derek only sees dollar signs. Madison follows whoever is loudest. This collection represents every culture that thrived in the American Southwest before colonization. These pieces aren't just valuable, they're sacred. They're history. They're the voices of people who have been silenced. I've already been in contact with the National Museum of the American Indian. They want to purchase the collection for $52 million. But I told them the decision would be yours. You can sell it all and be set for life. You can donate it and preserve our people's history. Or you can do what I hope you'll do. Create a museum here, on this land, so that people traveling Route 66 can stop and learn about the cultures that existed here long before highways. The choice is yours, Mija. But I know you'll make the right one. All my love, Grandma Rosa. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Quarant sept $1 million. My grandmother had built a $47 million collection while my family called her senile. I was still sitting on the floor, crying and laughing at the same time, when I heard footsteps on the stairs. I scrambled to my feet, wiping my face. A man appeared in the doorway, maybe 70 years old, with kind eyes and weathered brown skin. You must be Emma, he said. I'm Thomas Begay. I was your grandmother's friend and colleague. How did you know I was here? Rosa gave me a key years ago. Asked me to check on the place every week after she passed. I saw your car up top. He looked around the room with obvious affection. She told me you'd come. Said you were the only one who would. Did you know about all this? Thomas smiled. I helped her authenticate half these pieces. Your grandmother had an incredible eye. She could spot a genuine mimbrace from a reproduction at 20 paces. He walked over to one of the shelves, gently touching a black and white bowl. This one came from an estate sale in Albuquerque. The family was selling their grandmother's junk for $50. Rosa knew immediately it was worth $200,000. How is that even possible? Most people don't know what they're looking at. They see old pottery and think decoration. They don't understand the cultural significance, the artistry, the history. He turned to me. Rosa wanted to change that. She wanted people to learn. She mentioned you in her journal, I said, showing him the entry. She said you were the one who taught her proper authentication methods. Thomas nodded. I spent 40 years working for the Navajo Nation's Cultural Resources Department. When I met Rosa in 2008, she was a 68-year-old woman taking her first anthropology class. The professor dismissed her as a hobby student. But I saw the fire in her eyes, the hunger to learn. She reminded me of myself at that age. We spent the next 2 hours going through the collection. Thomas explained the significance of each culture, each style, each piece. The ancestral Puebloans who built incredible cliff dwellings, the Hohokam who created sophisticated irrigation systems, the Mimbres whose bowls featured artwork so intricate and symbolic it still astonished archaeologists today. The Smithsonian offer is real, Thomas said. I've seen the paperwork. They want the entire collection, $52 million. They'd give it a permanent home, properly displayed, with full cultural context. What do you think I should do? Thomas looked at me for a long moment. I think you should do what feels right to you, but I will say this. Your grandmother's dream was to build a museum here, a place where people could stop on their Route 66 road trips and learn about the cultures that existed here for thousands of years before the highway was built. She wanted to bring the knowledge to the people, not lock it away in a building in Washington, D.C. That would cost millions to build. Yes, but you'd have $52 million to do it with. He smiled. Or you could sell to private collectors, make even more money, and let these pieces disappear into someone's personal collection where no one will ever see them again. He left me his phone number and headed up the stairs. Take your time, Emma. Rosa didn't build this collection overnight. You don't have to make this decision overnight either. I spent the rest of the day in that underground room, reading every folder, looking at every piece, trying to understand what my grandmother had built. My phone buzzed repeatedly. Derek, Emma, where the hell are you? My friend is getting impatient. Derek, you're being ridiculous. That property is worthless. Derek, fine. If you want to throw away $150K, that's on you. I turned my phone off. That night, I drove into Flagstaff, maxed out my credit card on a hotel room and a proper meal, and called Thomas. I need help, I said. I want to protect this collection, but I don't know how. If my brother finds out about this, he'll try to claim it, Thomas finished. Rosa worried about that, too. That's why she set up a trust. The property and everything in it is legally yours, separate from the estate. Derek has no claim to it. He'll still try, probably. But the law is on your side. I spent the weekend documenting everything, taking photos, making notes. Thomas connected me with an art appraiser who specialized in indigenous pottery. Her name was Dr. Sarah Chen, and she arrived Monday morning with equipment and expertise that made my head spin. My God, she breathed, entering the underground room. This is one of the finest private collections of Southwest pottery I've ever seen. The condition alone. Emma, do you understand how rare it is to find Mimbres bowls in this state of preservation? I'm beginning to, I said. Dr. Chen spent 3 days examining, photographing, and cataloging. On the third day, she sat me down with her findings. Conservative estimate, based on recent auction prices and museum acquisition budgets, $47 million. If you sold to private collectors, you could get $60 million, maybe more. But you'd lose control over where the pieces end up. I don't want to sell to private collectors, I said. My grandmother wanted these pieces to educate people. Then you have 2 main options. Sell to the Smithsonian for their standing offer of $52 million, or use that money to build what your grandmother envisioned, a museum here. How much would a museum cost? Dr. Chen pulled out a folder. I took the liberty of putting together some preliminary estimates. Building a proper museum with climate control, security, educational programming, and staffing would run approximately $15 million. That includes purchasing additional land for parking, building the structure, and creating an endowment for ongoing operations. So I'd have $37 million left. Roughly, yes. Enough to live on comfortably while running the museum, with plenty left over for educational grants, community programming, whatever you want. That night, I sat in the booth where I'd slept my first night, looking at the folders spread across the table. $52 million. I could sell to the Smithsonian, take the money, and never work another day in my life. I could quit teaching, move out of my studio apartment, travel the world. Derek would lose his mind. The thought made me smile. But then I thought about my grandmother, working in this diner for 40 years, saving every penny, going back to school at 68, spending every weekend for 18 years building something meaningful. It's not about the money, is it, Grandma? I said aloud. My phone rang. Madison. Emma, where are you? Derek is freaking out. He says you're not answering his calls. I'm in Arizona. At the diner? Why? Did you meet with Derek's friend? No. Silence. Then, Emma, what's going on? Derek says you're being stupid about this. He's trying to help you. Did you know Grandma had a PhD? What? No. Grandma dropped out of school in 8th grade. In Mexico. She got her PhD from the University of New Mexico. In 1985. She was 68 years old. That's not. Emma, are you okay? Maybe the stress is. I'm fine, Madison. Better than fine, actually. Tell Derek his friend can stop waiting. I'm not selling. What? Emma, you can't afford to keep that place. Be reasonable. I hung up. Over the next week, things escalated quickly. Derek started calling me 20 times a day. When I blocked his number, he got our parents to call. When I blocked them, he showed up at my apartment in New York. Fortunately, I wasn't there. I was in Arizona, meeting with architects. Derek figured out where I was eventually. I was in the diner with Thomas and Dr. Chen, reviewing museum plans. When he walked in, "What the hell is this?" he demanded, looking at the blueprints spread across a table we'd brought in. "Emma, what are you doing?" "Planning a museum." "A museum? With what money? You're a teacher." "With the collection Grandma Rosa left me." "What collection? This is a dump. There's nothing here but broken equipment and roaches." Thomas stood up. "I think you should leave." "Who the hell are you?" "Emma, I'm your brother. I'm trying to help you before you make a huge mistake. This property is worth $150,000, maybe $200,000 if we're lucky. Take the money." "The property might be worth $200,000, I said calmly. "What's underneath it is worth considerably more." Derek's face changed. The dismissive smirk disappeared, replaced by sharp calculation. "What's underneath it? That's none of your business." "Like hell it isn't. Dad, did you hear this? She's hiding something." I hadn't noticed our father standing in the doorway. His expression was carefully neutral, the same look he'd had at the will reading. "Emma," my father said, "what's underneath the property?" "An inheritance Grandma left specifically to me. It's in a separate trust, not part of the estate. Derek has no legal claim to it." Derek's face flushed red. "You're lying. Grandma was senile. She had nothing. You're running some kind of scam." "Actually," Dr. Chen said pleasantly, "Mrs. Delgado was one of the most knowledgeable collectors of Southwest indigenous pottery I've ever met. Her authentication skills were remarkable." "Who the hell are you?" Dr. Sarah Chen, appraiser and curator specializing in Native American artifacts. "I've been cataloging Mrs. Delgado's collection for the past week." "Collection?" Derek's voice went up an octave. "What collection?" "That's confidential," Dr. Chen said. Derek turned on me. "Emma, I swear to God, if you're hiding valuable property that should be part of the estate..." "It's not part of the estate," I said. "The trust was created in 2010, 15 years before Grandma died. Everything in it is legally mine. You can call Attorney Morrison if you don't believe me." Derek pulled out his phone and did exactly that. I watched his face go from angry to pale to furious as he listened to whatever the attorney told him. "This is bullshit," he yelled, hanging up. "She manipulated Grandma. She took advantage of a senile old woman." "Your grandmother had a PhD in anthropology," Thomas said quietly. "She published 6 papers in peer-reviewed journals. She gave lectures at the University of Arizona. She was many things, but senile was not one of them." Derek stared at him, then at me. "How much?" "Excuse me? How much is this collection worth?" "Enough," I said. "I want half." "No. I'll sue." "The trust is ironclad," Dr. Chen said. "I've reviewed it myself. You have no legal standing." "Then I'll contest Grandma's will. I'll say she wasn't in her right mind." "Feel free," I said. "But you should know that Grandma documented everything. There are hundreds of pages of correspondence, authentication records, purchase agreements, all dated and notarized. She was of sound mind until the day she died, and her attorneys will testify to that." "You bitch," Derek hissed. "You conniving little bitch. You always were her favorite. This whole poor teacher act, living in that shitty apartment, driving that piece of crap car, it was all to manipulate her." "Get out," I said. "I will expose this. I will make sure everyone knows what you did." "Thomas," I said, "please call the police. My brother is trespassing." Derek left, but not before kicking over one of our chairs and putting his fist through a window. My father lingered in the doorway. "Emma," he said quietly, "is it true? Did Rosa really have a PhD?" "Yes. And this collection? Is it valuable?" "Very." He was quiet for a long moment. "She never told any of us." "You called her senile, Dad." Derek mocked her for going back to school. "When she tried to tell you about her research, you changed the subject." His face tightened. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" He left without another word. The next week was chaos. Derek filed a lawsuit claiming undue influence. Our parents issued a statement saying they were concerned about the family assets. Madison tried to play mediator but eventually gave up when I wouldn't agree to share with Derek. The local news picked up the story somehow. Teacher inherits multi-million-dollar pottery collection ran in the Flagstaff paper, then the Phoenix paper, then it went national. Elementary Teacher's Secret Inheritance, $47 million in Native American artifacts. My principal called me. Emma, I need you to come in and discuss this. I flew back to New York, dreading the conversation. But when I walked into her office, she smiled. Congratulations, she said. I saw the news about your grandmother's collection. That's remarkable. Thank you. I assume this means you'll be resigning? I'd been thinking about this question for days. Actually, I was hoping to request a leave of absence. I need to get the museum started, but I'd like to come back to teaching after that. She looked surprised. You're inheriting $47 million and you want to keep teaching? I love teaching. The money doesn't change that. Most people would retire. I'm not most people. She laughed. No, you're certainly not. Approved. Take the year. Your job will be here when you get back. Derek's lawsuit went nowhere. His attorney withdrew after reviewing the trust documents. Attorney Morrison called me personally to apologize for the family drama. Your grandmother was very specific about her wishes, he said. She anticipated Derek would react this way. She left a letter for him too, if you'd like to deliver it. The letter was sealed. I drove to Derek's penthouse in Manhattan and left it with the doorman. I found out later what it said, Madison told me. Derek, you got exactly what you deserved. A property that looks valuable but is already declining. The penthouse will be worth $5 million in 5 years and $3 million in 10. You'll probably sell it before then because you never learned to see long-term value. Emma got what she deserved, something that looks worthless but is priceless. I hope someday you understand the lesson. Rosa, Derek tried to contest that too, but there was nothing to contest. It was just a letter. The museum broke ground 6 months later. I hired a team of architects who specialized in culturally sensitive design. The building would incorporate traditional indigenous design elements while housing state-of-the-art climate control and security systems. Thomas became the lead cultural consultant. Dr. Chen signed on as the founding curator. We hired educators, security staff, and a community outreach coordinator whose sole job was to bring local schools to visit for free. We called it the Rosa Delgado Museum of Southwest Indigenous Heritage. The Smithsonian was disappointed but gracious. We're glad the collection will be accessible to the public, their director told me. Your grandmother would be proud. The museum opened 18 months after I'd first walked into the diner. The response was overwhelming. National Geographic did a feature. The New York Times sent a reporter. Schools from across the Southwest started booking field trips. On opening day, I stood in front of a case containing a Mimbraze bowl my grandmother had purchased for $50 at an estate sale. It was now valued at $200,000. The placard read, "Acquired by Dr. Rosa Maria Delgado, 2015. Dr. Delgado believed that education begins with accessibility. This museum exists because she believed everyone deserves to know their history. Madison came to the opening. Our parents did not. Derek definitely did not. I'm sorry, Madison said, looking around at the museum. I should have stood up for you. You're here now, I said. That's what matters. Derek's bankrupt, the penthouse market crashed. He couldn't keep up with the maintenance fees. The bank foreclosed last month. I felt a brief flash of satisfaction, then guilt, then something like sadness. Grandma tried to teach him. Some people can't learn, Madison said. I went back to teaching that fall. Every weekend, I flew to Arizona to work at the museum. The trust paid me a director's salary, and the endowment kept the museum running. The collection had actually appreciated to $58 million, but I had no plans to sell. This was my grandmother's legacy. These pieces belonged to the people whose ancestors had created them, and to everyone who wanted to learn. A year after the museum opened, I got a letter. It was from Derek, handwritten. Emma, I don't expect you to forgive me. I said unforgivable things. I let greed make me cruel. I'm working at a bookstore in Brooklyn now. It's humbling. It's also clarifying. Grandma was right. I only saw dollar signs. You saw what mattered. I don't want anything from you. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what she was trying to teach me. Derek. I didn't respond. But I didn't throw the letter away either. 5 years after inheriting the Desert Rose Diner, I stood in the museum on the anniversary of my grandmother's death. We'd added a new wing dedicated to contemporary Native American artists. The collection had grown to include partnerships with local tribes, and we'd started a grant program funding Indigenous students studying anthropology. Thomas found me standing in front of my grandmother's photo, which hung in the entrance hall. "She'd be proud," he said. "I hope so. I know so. You did exactly what she hoped you'd do. You saw the value beyond the surface." I looked around at the museum, at the families walking through the exhibits, at the school group gathered around a docent learning about pottery techniques. My brother had gotten a penthouse worth millions that he couldn't afford to keep. I'd gotten a rundown diner hiding a priceless legacy. Grandma Rosa had known exactly what she was doing. The real treasure wasn't in the pottery. It was in understanding that value isn't always visible, that worth isn't measured in dollars, and that the best inheritance is the wisdom to know the difference. I inherited a diner. I discovered a museum. But what I really received was the greatest lesson my grandmother could teach. True wealth is knowing what matters.